Welcome to the Freedom Fridays podcast. With me, your host, Pete Clark, the Whispers guy. Work seems to expand to the time that we give it. And I've been investing my time, occasionally on a Friday, to explore how we use our time, our energy, our attention, and the impact it has on our identity. I've been exploring over season 1 some of the mindset shifts in the handcuffs of I have to the freedom of I choose to. And I've shared some conversations, some tips, some tools about how you might want to invest your own time, your own energy, your own attention, how you might want to, if you choose to, make some changes to your identity, how you might have freedom from I have to and design a life around I choose to. If that's of interest to you, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to this week's edition of the Freedom Fridays podcast. This week, I'm chatting to a colleague, but probably, and he might not know this, somebody I perceive as somebody that I feel closest to professionally and as a consequence personally. And I may never have said that to him before, so he might come on and be a little bit shocked. But we're going to talk about one of the big transformations he's been through. And I'm so pleased and grateful and just quite inspired by the story and the outcome. So, Mr. Steve Ellis, welcome to the podcast.
Cheers, Pete. Yeah, you've embarrassed me now. That was a bit embarrassing. Although I do say that you are my mentor, and you've always been my mentor, especially in this space, the place that we occupy around helping people to be bigger, better versions of themselves. So you were my first mentor in this space. So there's a mutual backslap there. But yes, I've flushed up a little bit there.
Yeah, well, I think I'm flushing up too, because whilst that may be your perception and that may be the apparency of, but I'm merely on the next line, not even the next page. And sometimes not even on the next line.
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it, mate. So, yeah, there's a bit of a loving we're having there for a second. Steve, as you know, we chatted offline. The main context for the Freedom Fridays podcast is to try and explore ways in which people have navigated certain life transitions, some big career, some big life, some big health things. How have they done that? What's happened? What were the mistakes? What were the learns? And so really it starts with this main question, and this we'll pick up threads as we go. What's the big change or transformation that you've been through?
Yes, I've taken a deep breath because it's tough sometimes to know where to start to answer that. I'll start with a lack of expectation that I even needed one. Let's start there. I'm not saying I've breezed through life. It's been hard work, hard yards, but I've never really found myself in a situation in which the kind of things that I was doing needed to change. Yeah, I was working hard. I didn't want to stop changing that, and working hard was bearing fruit. I was doing exercise and exercising a lot was bearing fruit. I was socializing with friends and family, and that was bearing fruit. Things were all right. Things were good. And then just back in April, I was diagnosed as being pre-diabetic, which isn't diabetes, it's pre-diabetic. It's so I was
just thinking about it.
A lot. Pardon?
You're just thinking about it.
Yeah, I was getting ready for it. I was on your marks, get set, go. Yeah. So look, but it came as a real shock. So I was getting a bit tired, and I'm one of those people that never goes to the doctors unless he's accumulated at least 4 or 5 different ailments. And I'd probably accumulated 4 or 5 different ailments. And my wife said, get to the doctors. I went to the doctors, had some blood tests. The blood test came back pretty much great, except one indicator, which was the HbA1c indicator of blood sugar levels. Getting a bit technical there. And and I was 45. Now, on that scale, when you are between 42 and 47, you're considered pre-diabetic. The moment you tip into 48, you are diabetic, and diabetes comes with, you know, a lot of issues, especially at my age, of slender age of 53. And it did shock me. I was taken aback, actually. I sort of went, oh, are you, you know, whether it was an identity thing, or whether it was a fear thing, or whether it was a mortality thing. I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure what it was, but I know I felt anxious and nervous and worried enough to, you know, want to do something about that. So so the last 3 months or so, 4 months, I've continued. So back in, I guess, May, June, July, I've been on a regime to turn that around, which is good. Pre-diabetes, for anybody that's got pre-diabetes, it is something that you can turn around. It's something that you can transform, and it's been an interesting transformation, not least because of what we do, you and I, helping others to transform and to change and to adapt and to have bigger, better lives. And I guess that's interesting because that's what we teach others. And here I am having to, you know, walk the talk. And that was quite interesting and rather self-damning at parts. And also, you know, it's interesting to go through a change, and it's interesting to experience what that has been feeling like, and also the challenges of that transformation, and just noticing that those issues that you experience during transformation, well, they were true for me at least, but I suspect that the complexity that I experienced is true for others as well, right? So it's not as simple as, all right, change. Where you go, 3, 2, 1, change, do things differently, and you'll get different results. It's not, well, from my experience it wasn't as simple as that. So yeah. Pre-diabetes.
Lots of things to pick up on there. I will, you know, acknowledge and comment and, you know, align with when you've been through any form of change, forced or not, that perhaps you didn't know you needed. Certainly in the work I do, and I'm guessing it's the same with you, it gives you a better appreciation of what's required beyond the books, a better appreciation of what really is required beyond what the academics or the framework or the model will tell you. And I have, hand on heart, fully guilty of in the past, a bit like, well, just do that, just follow these steps, just do this and you'll be different. And I hope I'm landing this way, but I'm much more grateful and humbled, and I have to say a little bit frustrated sometimes when I hear others, clients included, going, well, we'll just do this, we'll just tell them and they'll be fine. And I'm going, oh my God, you've got no idea really what people individually, and therefore multiply that by collectively, go through to go from to.
Yeah, totally. You touch on a point that I think resonates with me, which is the books, right? So vocabulary and, you know, Venn diagrams or staircases or whatever visual representation of whatever we're talking about, in this case, transformation, just is not sufficient, is nowhere near sufficient to sort of represent the human experience of change. And therefore, to coach somebody to follow the steps, to coach somebody to you know, do this or do that, is somewhat naive, I guess. And I fall into the same trap of saying with clients, we'll take you on an 18-month transformation journey, and here are the steps for that. And clients themselves go, great, and then they execute the steps, right? But the subtlety or you know, nuance of human response to that sort of rather clunky step that somebody's just communicated or taught them through is just not well, it's not empathic enough, right? So and that was interesting. That was interesting to almost recognize that sometimes I didn't have the vocabulary, or I didn't even have the awareness or to be able to express why I was failing in my transformation, or it wasn't going as well, or I was anxious about it, or I was frustrated by it, or even delighted. Why am I so happy about the progress I'm making? Sometimes we haven't got the vocabulary or the model, right? That said, of course, in my recent blog, I've tried to put it into some steps. I've tried to say, here's what I observed that I went through. But in writing that blog, I acknowledge that that's A, that was me, and B, that wasn't a full representation of my journey, because I can't even begin to express it properly. Right.
Yeah. Look, I do want to pick up on that, because I think there's some really helpful things that you've written in your blog, and I'll pick up on that later because I think people would find it helpful. But I'm with you in terms of any of my experiences, even the stuff you've got in your blog. It's kind of like a 2D version of a 3D experience. And if one takes it literally, you're probably not going to get the same results, because we are by definition different. We are entirely unique in some nuance, in some form. So look, take it as a guide to pointing in the direction that I went. Here's the path I took, but the path has to be unique. The path has to be owned by you, the team. That's the uniqueness about it, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. And for anybody reading the book, reading the blog, reading whatever, that's all it is. It is it's somebody else's representation, not yours. It's somebody else's guide path, not yours. And I guess the biggest invitation I always offer is just to notice your own path, notice your own sense of progress or lack of progress, and investigate and be curious about what it is that's making you progress or not progress, and double down on empathy and understanding yourself, and that might help. And the blog is just my representation of what I noticed, and I suspect I missed a lot as well.
Well, yeah, the classic, fish don't see water, you don't see your own golf swing. How could you possibly know all of that stuff? But we'll get to that, because I think there's some really helpful things in there. I do want to, if you're willing to, pick up on almost the first comment you made. You had a lack of expectation that you even needed one, right? Binary, or was it whispering?
Okay, yeah, that's good. I probably whispering, being, as I reflect now, and that's a great question, because you ponder and you make me think. Yeah, look, I was fit. I was doing a lot of running. I was going to the gym a lot. I was working well. Things were going well. If I went back to my 20s, I go, you probably need to reduce your alcohol intake, Steve. But it's not actually showing up in any particularly bad social outcomes. In my 30s with kids, you could probably do with some more sleep, Steve, but it wasn't really showing up in any bad outcomes for me. So I might be hugely in denial about that. There probably were bad outcomes. I was just either not accepting of them, noticing of them, or indeed bothered by them, motivated by them in any way. So this was, I did have an incident in my late 40s or mid 40s in which I damaged my back. But that wasn't a gradual thing. That was a moment I damaged my back. And yes, that has meant I've adjusted some of my activities. But it's genuine, up until here, I'm like going, you're all right. And so I wasn't expecting, and maybe it's in the word transformation. I think back to your whispers question. I think there was definitely some whispers saying you probably need to adjust, Steve. You probably need to adapt a little bit, Steve. You could probably do with eating a little less sugar. And Steve, you do notice sometimes when you get back to the house after a long drive that the passenger seat has got lots of crisp wrappers and snack wrappers and everything. There's probably some clues out there, but in my mind, I was probably saying moderate adjustments, right? The diagnosis of pre-diabetes was that's
Right.
not a moderate adjustment.
Yeah. That
That's got to
classic.
do with-
This
it's got
packet
to
of
scale.
biscuits won't kill me.
Yeah. So the one packet of crisp at a time was whispering to me.
This one will be fine.
Yeah.
It won't be this.
Right,
It won't be this Smith's pickled onion crisp that will kill me.
It won't be this one. So yeah, I was probably listening to some of the whisper that said you probably shouldn't and probably should. There it is. Probably should and shouldn't do certain things, but there wasn't an expectation that it required a transformation.
Yeah. It wasn't a shout yet, to use my language.
Yeah.
I wonder as well, Steve. I've been pondering this a lot recently. Whilst you might have been getting whispered to, which does beg the question, who's doing the whispering, which maybe we'll get into that topic, right? Let's take that offline possibly. But I'm going to guess, because if it's anything like what I go through, there's part of you that whisper and says, Steve, you probably shouldn't be having that packet of biscuits. But there's another whisper that creeps in that goes, yeah, I'll be okay. Yeah, but you probably shouldn't. Yeah, but it'll be okay. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll sort it. There's almost like a dual dialogue going on, a dual dialogue of whispering that convinces us in some way that not this one, not now. As you reflect on that, was that the other voice, the other internal voice? Like, how many voices have we got? Yeah. Was there a couple of things going on internally that caused you not to hear it?
So you placed something over to one side earlier, and I think the two things are connected. Like who was doing the whispering? So there's who's doing the whispering and what are they whispering? Right. So inevitably, I'm doing a lot of the whispering. The other version of me is saying, "Hey, you could probably lose a little bit of weight. Hey, you're a reasonably bright guy." My wife, by the way, is an endocrinologist. She's a consultant endocrinologist that works with children with diabetes, right? So the language of diabetes is in our house, right? So I've got some awareness about this topic. Yeah. So there's the other version of me that's sort of having a little chat and saying you should and you shouldn't and stuff like that. For health reasons, you should and you shouldn't. But for other reasons, the world is telling me I'm okay. So nobody at work is telling me that, hey, you look like you put some weight on, or hey, you're probably, because nobody's giving me a blood test at work and saying I'm pre-diabetic. Nobody's saying those other things like, hey, you're unattractive. My wife's not telling me I'm unattractive. There are other things going on in my life, whether it's sex life, social life, other relationships, other things going on in my life that are saying you're all right. So the scale of the voice that's saying, yeah, all those other things you're pretty good at, everything's going all right at, this little niggle that you have in your brain that says logically you already know that you're eating some of the wrong stuffs. Well, it's not impacting on the critical variables or the KPIs of life, right? The KPIs of life are like they're all okay, right? And I've talked to some clients about that, as in some of their challenges or some of their suboptimal activities are not yet showing up in the KPIs of the business. And you go, that's an interesting, because here I am saying I've got lots of KPIs of my life, not that I've written them down, but generally speaking, I feel okay in my environment, in my life, in what's going on, and they were all going well. So the whisper wasn't loud enough to shout louder and over and above all the other metrics of life. The person doing the whispering, well, society whispers to us you're acceptable, in the form of Instagram or in the form of social media or in the form of whether your friends invite you out to dinner or whether you've got those material things. Society is telling you you're okay. I'm telling myself I'm okay. The immediate people around me are loving me, and so everything's okay. And I am telling myself you're a naughty boy. You know you
With a
shouldn't be
smile
doing
on your
that.
face, you're a naughty boy. You shouldn't be
Yeah, but
doing that. But we all love a bit of spontaneity. And come on, I'm going to be naughty. Hey.
Well, that was one of the things I put in my blog, was also the naughtiness, if you like, was almost reduced in its feeling by this other thing called deservedness. I've got this entitlement, like this, I've worked hard, therefore I deserve a treat. Or you're tired at the end of the day. Why are you tired, Steve? Well, because you've worked hard and you've given out to the world, and you've given to your wife, and you've given to your children, and you've given to the world, you've given to clients. So, hey, have this treat. Right?
What about me?
What about me? What about me? And and that sort of I mentioned it. It's actually a moment, and I didn't notice it until I investigated it. A moment of reduced self-esteem in a form, some kind of self-concept, self-esteem thing. It's a real bind here. You deserve the chocolate bar. You're not deserving of being healthy.
Wow.
Steve, you've not put sufficient discipline into your life to deserve to be healthy, but you deserve the chocolate bar because you've given to others. So you're deserving and undeserving, and it's quite the outcome was the chocolate bar. You ate it, right? So in one part you deserved it. Everybody deserves it. Everybody deserves a good life. Everybody deserves a treat. And it wasn't a treat, it became a regular thing, but you deserve it because of all these other things saying you deserved it. But actually you didn't deserve to be healthy. You didn't deserve other things. And so actually I would say that, and the greatest of those two things was the lower self-esteem that was telling me to have it. And weirdly, of course, and you'll know this, the moment you consume it, the self-esteem doesn't grow. It definitely doesn't grow, because that little voice tells you, there you go, I told you, you're not strong enough, you're not disciplined enough.
Oh.
You don't deserve to be healthy because you're not good enough. And you're like, whoa, that's big. Yeah. So yeah, on the one part you're convincing yourself you deserve it, but the person doing the convincing is undeserving. Yeah,
that's a bit of a mind blown.
Yeah.
The second thing you said, which I thought was fascinating, and I love your perspective in hindsight, and then we will get into some of your thoughts about what to do about it. And when you said you were shocked, it shocked me, and I didn't know if it was an identity thing or a fear thing or a mortality thing. And there might not be a binary answer to this. On reflection, do you get any sense of what it was about now?
I mean, I guess given I expressed it in those terms, it was a combination of that. I think I've always seen myself as a performer. I'm not an elite performer. I'm a good performer, top quartile performer in areas of life. So definitely even that sentence is an identity sentence. So there's definitely some identity thing going on. Yeah. I did start to notice around the gym some relativity going on. Like, he looks older than me and yet looks better in better shape. So maybe I was going into second quartile and third quartile. So there's definitely some identity thing. There probably is some mortality thing. There's a number of things going on with family at the moment that has put with parents and so on, that put mortality into my mind, and wanting to have a lifespan and a health span, right? So two terms, both wanting to have the longevity of life, but wanting to make sure that life is a healthy one. And we certainly witness at the moment in our family of somebody's lifespan not necessarily being a health span, and I don't want to be unhealthily alive kind of thing. So I think that was probably a certainly contributing factor to that moment of, oh, that was a lot more painful than I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah. A way I've enjoyed hearing that being said is the goal is to die young as late as possible.
Yeah.
Which I think is a lovely way of combining lifespan and health span.
Yeah. That's
as
nice,
opposed to, dying early as ill as possible.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
Very different. So Steve, why don't we jump into some of the reflections you had on your blog? Because obviously this is in hindsight, and as we talked about at the front, people shouldn't follow these literally,
No.
but it might just provide some signposts, some guideposts on the way as they go through their own personal journey, personally, professionally, relationship, etc., etc. Would you be happy to do that?
Yeah. The hindsight one's not quite. It was, everything's in moderate hindsight, isn't it? But I decided to see it as a study thing too. So it was like, so I was noticing almost with each action whether it was working or not working. And whether it was helpful or unhelpful for me during my 3 months. So I wrote the blog afterwards, which looks like in hindsight, but actually I was sort of writing it as I was going along. So the headlines were noticing whether the 3 typical things that happen in transformation were ever going to be strong enough, and they weren't. So the first typical thing is the one that we spent a bit of time talking about, which is the sort of burning platform, the sort of fear thing, the sort of, businesses, we do this with clients all the time. What's the reason or the burning platform for the transformation? And they'll say something like, well, it's a strategy change, it's a market position, or our product has become commoditized, so we need to become something else, whatever it is. And if we don't, we're going to die. We're going to reduce our margins and everything's going to be bad, right? So there's the burning platform, and I had one, a pretty powerful one, because get any worse and the consequences are bad. Second one was like a goal. So I set myself the goal of losing 10 kilos and going from 89, nearly 90 kilos to 80 kilos. So that was a goal. And the strategy was eat less rubbish, eat less rubbish. There was a few extended strategies like do a little bit of fasting, but basically eliminate all the bad stuff, right? And that typically is what clients do. You go, right, there's the burning platform. So we're going to do this, and here's how we're going to do it. Right. Yeah. I think what really helped me was telling lots of people, loads of people. Just there was a moment when I was telling so many people that I felt like I was boasting about pre-diabetes. I've got pre-diabetes, and it was really weird. But telling people was super helpful.
So did you tell them burning platform, goal, strategy, or all of the above?
I told them mainly strategy. So I said, I've got pre-diabetes. I recognize that it's pretty dangerous. So you will witness me foregoing. You will witness me foregoing crisps or snacks or chocolate or stuff. Please help me on that. That was pretty much. So there was a sort of communicate and a request. And that was really helpful because it was those social moments in which there's a party and people are going, do you want another beer, do you want another beer, do you want another beer? Or there's a party, do you want some crisps, do you want some dip with those snacks or those crisps, do you want these things, the typical things that you put out. Now they did not put those things out. They just didn't put them out directly in front of me, or they didn't then tease me for not having another beer. Have another one. Go on, have another one. In fact, weirdly, have another one. You deserve it. They almost reaffirm my deserving narrative that I shared with you earlier. So by telling lots of people, they become more sympathetic and empathetic to your situation, to the point that they begin to help you. My friends helped me. My wife helped me more. In those social situations, people understood me better. They understood why I was not behaving possibly like I had previously. Right? at any of those parties. So that was really important. Just tell people.
And Steve, can I ask we're because the reason I'm asking the question is when we make these changes, apart from maybe the stark one for you, sometimes and I've been victim and party to this, like I think many people have, we make the changes based on someone we want to be, but the person we are, someone else has a connection to that, and so me changing means they lose out. Broadly, I'm wondering, of the many people that you told, did you have any naysayers going, what you doing, you idiot, get back to what you were doing before, because actually, without even saying, I have an attachment to the person you were?
Yeah, I'm very acutely aware of the sort of David Rock scarf model, and that there it is, right? There's the relatedness. How does my behavior and this change, how does it relate to them, and how does it relate back to me? Yeah, and so there's a loss of something for somebody, right? Even if it's a loss of familiarity with who this person is, or predictability about this person.
Oh, I used to be you're being healthy, as if that was a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, less so that, because I think that's reasonably easy for people. Some of my friends, at least, the people around me were able to go, that's okay.
What I find interesting, without the I'm pre-diabetic, I'm trying to lose 10 kilos, without those two things, had you just said, no dip for me, please.
Yeah.
No more beer for me, please. I wonder what the response would have been.
Yeah. I get you, because that's unpredictable. That and so that you've changed.
There's something wrong with you.
We've changed. And if you've changed and we've changed, I can't trust you anymore. I can't trust my dialogue with you. I can't trust my exchange with you because you've changed, which our relationship has changed. Oh, this is freaking me out. I'm going freaking you. I'm the one with pre-diabetes. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So being able to tell people what it was to help them understand my change, make them almost weirdly feel a bit more comfortable with observing me change. So it's absolutely right. And the other thing about communicating it is, and I knew this from the books, right? I knew this was it increases my sense of accountability. As soon as I've externalized something, people are anticipating an adjustment, and therefore I'm going to live up to that. It becomes a sort of expectation out there.
Yeah.
The second thing that, and again, I probably knew this. I did know this, not probably. I did know this, but I'd never really done it. Because previously the big ambitious goal was always good enough for me. So running marathons, I want to run it at such and such a time. Really, I could do that. And my wife would always comment that I never trained very well for whenever I did marathons.
You just ran.
Yeah, I just ran. Started training 4 weeks before the marathon and did one. I just did one, and because I was never really disciplined enough to break it down into a proper training regime, whereas she always did. She had like a 12-week training plan, and it was broken down day by day, and it was broken down by different training types, but different training runs, from fartlek running to medium distance running to slow long distance. She could do all of that, and I just went running. So I thought I'd just stop eating, so you eat better, right? I thought that goal and strategy was concrete enough. It clearly wasn't. So I really, on this transformation, really did need to break it down into sort of micro habits. And fortunately, it was on the shortly after reading the Atomic Habits book, and so that was really helpful. Really breaking it down into micro moments of decision making. That moment, whether it's 10 p.m. at night or 11 p.m. at night and everybody's gone to bed, there's a moment. It's that moment after doing exercise. It's that moment when I mentioned it in the blog. I travel a lot and I use a local train station, and as I go up onto the platform in the train station, literally that side is WH Smith's and that side is Starbucks, and they're perfectly positioned to entice you in to eat stuff. So I purposely walk and go to the end of the platform and remove myself from that. So I broke down both the environment, I talk about that later in the blog, but the environment and the moments of choice into micro habits. Even, that moment you put the kettle on. Steve, what do you normally do when you put the kettle on? Well, the kettle's right next to the cupboard, which is right next to the fridge. What's that micro habit, and what are you going to do and say to yourself in that moment that means you no longer do what you previously would have done, which is reach in and slice a bit of cheese and have a lump of cheese, or reach in and grab a snack or something. So breaking it down into micro habits absolutely was pivotal to this particular transformation.
Again, if I can offer an observation, Steve, I think your distinction of micro moments of decision making is even better than micro habits.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because I think the habit is the opening the fridge, cutting a cheese, and the decision point, the micro moment is the putting the kettle on. Oh, what do I do next?
Yeah.
I think that feels for me like the precursor to what's the habit I need to build.
Yeah.
So the habit I used to have was Starbucks Smiths. Oh, hang on. In that moment, as I walk up the stairs and I can see the logos, oh, my habit is triggered. What if I just focus on the end of the platform? But I think those micro moments I'll certainly be nicking that, if that's okay. Micro moments of habit, of decision making, and I think that's really powerful.
Well, we need, the decision precedes the behavior, I guess. To what extent you're in control of that. So the decision, go to the end of the platform. Well, that then becomes a habit. I'm actually helping that by picking up a newspaper and going to the end of the platform, sitting down and occupying my mind with something. So that's the new habit, reading stuff. The decision making. It's interesting, that decision making thing, because that there was something else that I noticed. I've been listening to quite a few podcasts around this topic for the last sort of 12 months. And again, it's never really applied to Steve. He's already got a healthy ego. He doesn't need any more healthy ego stuff. But this point I made earlier about the sort of deserving, but having low self-esteem and not deserving. I investigated that a little bit more around what was that self-esteem issue, and in what way could you like yourself more or love yourself more. So one of the I think powerful things that helped me in the transition was connecting to purpose, connecting to identity, giving yourself a reason beyond not being diabetic, right? What's the other reason? So it did go back to, I want to be healthy. I do want to have a health span, not just a lifespan. So there was definitely that identity thing. But there was something else in the moments of decision making, the sort of T-junction of a decision, go right to the end of the platform, go left into Starbucks or whatever, wherever that moment of decision making was. And I practiced something. I don't know whether this is useful for anybody listening. I practiced something that I called it self-love, but it was actually probably future love, loving your future self and being attracted to the future self. And it wasn't a physical attraction, it was a pride attraction. So the question that I asked quite regularly at the point of decision making, that T-junction, was, will your future self love yourself? And that future self could be in 2 seconds time. In 2 seconds time, will you be proud of who you are, right? Or in 2 minutes time, or in 2 hours time? Will you like yourself? And do you like yourself enough now to like yourself in 2 seconds time? It was quite tough. It was like, it's a bit of a mental challenge. Do you like yourself now? Do you like yourself now enough to like yourself in 2 seconds time? So as I got to the top of the stairs, do you like yourself enough now to like yourself when you get to the end of the platform? It's so funny as well, because you sort of go, yes, I do like myself enough. I do love myself. And you get to the end of the platform and you sit there going, yes, God, I'm good. Yeah, you did. I did. I liked myself at the end of the platform. I don't know whether it's a little gimmick or a little trick or whatever. I don't know whether it's genuinely the definition of self-love. It probably isn't. But a couple of little coaching questions. around liking myself now enough to like myself in 2 minutes time because of the decision I was making now, not just on the platform, but in front of the fridge or in front of the cupboard. I really enjoyed, actually. I actually enjoyed it made me smile. As soon as I caught myself asking the question, it actually made me smile. And maybe it was the smile and the endorphin that really I enjoyed. I have no idea, but I thought I'd share that with people because, well, I found it amusing as much as anything else, and helpful.
For me, Steve, it's you know how we're told, and it seems to bear fruit, that if you own your morning, you own the day, and the way we own our morning is the night before. Right? It sounds like, as you've thought about those micro moments of decision making, as you using the example, walk up the train station, sit steps with Smiths and Starbucks on either side, ahead of time, you've imagined yourself asking yourself that question. So you've kind of owned that moment by owning the moment before. You've owned that moment in the morning by thinking about it the night before and go, when I get to the top of those steps, I'm going to look left, look right, see the logos and go, Steve, would you love yourself more than that? Whatever the question was. So you're going to have a little bit of what's the question, what's the prompt, what's the statement, and are you willing to practice it or even consider it ahead of time, ahead of the moment that it happens to you?
Yeah. It's interesting because then there's a new trigger starts to get established, right? So triggers are fascinating. So the trigger is the logo, is the saliva, is the whatever it is. But the more I've enjoyed the smile at looking down the platform, at the end of the platform, there's a new trigger that never used to be there anymore, right? And the new trigger at the end of the platform is like this picture of Steve who's smiling glibly at himself, reading the newspaper, thinking, "Oh, you're so clever." and it's quite an enjoyable little trigger. As I look right, I can see him at the end of the platform. So I thought that was useful to share. I think a couple of other things.
Before you do, can I go off on a tangent for a second? And something that I think for me, and I think you'd think this is important too, which you've just touched upon. And I'm conscious of our, immersed experience in what we do for a living, right? We help individuals and organizations transform. So guess what? We've got to be able to read about it, do about it, facilitate all the kind of thing, we're kind of immersed in that world. And where I'm going tangentially is this. How does someone, there's not an answer, but it's more just a discussion point. Given that there is a high rate of middle-aged or male depression, albeit even further than that, how do we open up the possibility to have a conversation about self-love when even those two words on their own could trigger someone to shut up, but together it's like 10 times the oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, for people that have had no immersion in any of the stuff that we might be aware of. And that not to say that we're any better, but maybe even worse because we know. But any thoughts on how we use somebody we can open up that conversation? Because it sounds like that is a critical variable in what's happening around the world.
Oh yeah, crikey, that's a debate and a half.
I just thought I'd open that one up.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. To use your own brand, really, one whisper at a time. I think you mentioned almost the trigger of those two words, put them together, and that might weirdly create the opposite reaction. So rather than engaging in a dialogue about self-love, you end up coming up with a yes but dialogue, yeah but, and no, I can't, and no, and all that resistance. I think one whisper at a time. I think if we can from an early age, or as early as possible, introduce people to a wider vocabulary of emotions, words that express feelings, emotions, and senses and states. I'm a big believer that your ability to recognize yourself and then to be able to express self is in part something to do with vocabulary. You know, I mentioned at the top of the call, I'm not even sure I've got the vocabulary to express what I went through, and hence we use models and frameworks and things. But I think around self-love or self-awareness and feeling, I think so one whisper at a time, improve the vocabulary, one person at a time. I think if we put it into a work context, I think the better that leaders and indeed people in positions of trust, so I might include human resources or people officers, if they can be a go-to place for well-being, a go-to place, a safe place. But if managers and leaders can be better at creating, you know, psychological safety or having these conversations, then I think that shifts it. One whisper, one person, or I think the story goes, one starfish at a time, kind of thing. I can help this person. I can help this person. You know, beyond that, you're looking at large institutions making statements of intent, and I'm not sure that actually. I'm not sure whether people would respond to those large institutions, governments and things making statements of intent, or healthcare systems. Yeah, I think there's possibly something that could be done at a macro level around healthcare systems. But you know, middle age might be where it often, not always, but often surfaces, but the cause wasn't middle age. It started in the dialogues that we were having when we were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's not to say, oh, you know, I suffered trauma back then, but just the narrative and the interchange that parents have and society has with everybody. That's what puts the shield up.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I've planted the seed for our second podcast then.
Yes, mate. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, back to your blog. What have we that one so far? What was this?
The last couple of things that occurred to me were during the experience was, and we sort of touched on it when we talk about those moments of decision making and the questions that you ask yourself. It's just paying a lot more attention to the chatter. The voice that keeps going, you deserve, you don't deserve, you deserve, you don't deserve. Okay, and trying to interrupt that and with choices and better questions, and therefore better actions. And then the last couple was, I touched on it at the top, to do with people. The most significant person in my life is my wife, Debbie, and not just telling Debbie what my goal was and what my situation was, but asking for a little bit more help from certain people around me. And in this case, Debbie, particularly around, it was a big ask, actually, it was a big ask. So in the last 12 years, 13 years of our relationship, she would always scream at me when she'd go to the cupboard and go, the crisps have gone, they're for the weekend, they're a treat for the weekend. The chocolate's gone, they're a treat for the weekend. I go, well, you keep putting them in the fridge, you keep putting them in the cupboard, stop putting them in the cupboard. Yes, I put them in there for the weekend, Steve, kind of conversation. So on the request of the people directly around me, I actually came at a loss for her. Can you, at least for the next period, whatever that is, actually not buy those things at all, for you or anybody else? You know, if you want them for a treat at a week, could you possibly consume, if you're going to consume them, just out of sight kind of thing. I wanted to put them beyond temptation kind of thing. And kindly she did. So I think we still, until possibly a new pattern of behaviour which says that when I see them in the cupboard, the trigger doesn't stimulate me to have them on a Monday, Tuesday. I shared in the blog on a couple of occasions, well, not a couple, many occasions, I would consume the chocolate bar, feel so guilty. I'd then drive to the nearby service station or shop, buy a replacement one and put it back in the fridge before Debbie noticed, right? I'd start replenishing things, but I mean, it's awful as I think about it now. So there was a request for Debbie to remove all of those things, and until I got to a point where when they were in there, they weren't triggering me to consume them, and we're at that point, which is great. And the final one was, and I knew this again, was as you're going on in my case, a sort of 12-week transformation, the pace of behavior change and the pace of result do not always coincide. So I had a relatively fast pace of behavior change. Eliminate chocolate, crisps, snacks, cereals, massively reduce bread, reduce all of these things. I had a quite quick result. I lost 2 or 3 kilos relatively quickly. And then the behavior stayed exactly the same, probably got even more disciplined, but the results just plateaued. And for like 3 weeks, and it was really tempting. I remember recording it in my journal that the chatter was, this doesn't work, this isn't working anymore. And then you get sort of self-deprecating. It doesn't work for you, you can't do this, all of the stuff that's about to say, oh, let's give this up and go back. It's too much like hard work. So my last comment would be, with regards to measurement, yeah, measure it, it drives your accountability, but don't be beholden to the measurement all the time. Be pretty patient, and just keep things in perspective a little bit. And don't get bent out of shape, don't blow it all out of proportion. Those 3 weeks in the middle, they were the toughest.
In the middle.
They weren't though, Pete. The second 3 weeks, my behavior was no different to the first 3 weeks.
Right.
Exactly the same, but the results weren't the same. So notice how externally referenced I'd become. I go, oh, I can only feel good if the thing outside of me called the scales, right? If they're moving, if they're changing, I'll feel good, right? Boom, I've been teaching this stuff for 25 years. You'd think I'd know better by now. Is to keep things in perspective, stay true to the behavior, stay true to the discipline of all of that, and just be patient with the KPIs, or be patient with the results coming out of the other end.
It reminds me of that phrase, the person that loves walking will always walk further than the person that's walking to get somewhere.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I've been using that quite a lot lately. Yeah, absolutely. Enjoy. Oh, it's full of cliches, isn't it? You know, enjoy the journey versus the destination. And who you become as a result of the goal is more important than the goal itself. And I totally get that. But I totally get it. And I've got this new sense of can do. Okay. Can do when you find it really hard. I've always had a can do when it's easy. And I've found many things relatively easy. Yeah. I've now got a reference called you can do it when your experience of doing it is hard. Cool. And I've quite liked that result in who I am.
Steve, I suspected this would go really quickly, and we've literally scratched the surface. So one, I'm very grateful.
Let's do it again.
Let's do it again. So I'm very grateful for you sharing. We will post your blog excerpts and stuff like that on the podcast notes so people can reference that. Thank you for being willing to open your head and heart to whoever's listening. And if it's just my mum, that's okay.
That's okay for me too.
But I really thank you for being on the podcast, and it seems like this is quite an easy conversation to have about many things. And I can't believe we're quite where the time's gone. So I'm just really grateful for that. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.